Welcome to Wavelengths, a podcast with Amphenol Broadband Solutions.
Welcome to another episode of Wavelengths, an Amphenol Broadband Solutions podcast. Per usual, I'm your host, Daniel Litwin. Thank you so much for joining us on another episode of the show. Always a pleasure getting to sit down and talk shop, whether it's with the Amphenol team or the larger broadband industry on the major technologies, trends, topics, and timely news that are shaping our industry and defining the future of our work. So thank you again for joining us. I want to make sure that you're all caught up on previous episodes of the show and that you have access to all of our solutions and services and resources as well. You can find other episodes of Wavelengths on amphenolbroadband.com. Again, amphenolbroadband.com. Again, you can find all episodes of our podcast, as well as more information about our solutions and services, our various segments as a company, and the different industries that we serve, and the different slices of the industry that we provide solutions for. But you can also subscribe to Wavelengths on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So just hit that subscribe button when you're on the app, and you'll find yourself with a full catalog of conversations with our team and others in the industry so that you don't miss out on previous conversations and so you get those notifications when we drop new episodes. All right, everyone, let's jump into the episode. We're going to keep the intro brief today because there's a lot to learn. There's actually not as much to intro here because we really do need to tap into the insights of our guest today. With our episode, we're going to be breaking down the future of robotics in the broadband industry. This is a really exciting topic, right? We need to dig into how robotics are transforming the larger broadband industry. We need to get a sense for how robotics are serving an applied role in automated network maintenance, installation, and inspection. And really, we need to understand how these two major trends, the evolution of and the sort of modernization of our telecommunications infrastructure and the advancement of robotics and AI-powered robotics are coming together and creating a really interesting intersection where we see two modernizations morph into a renewed and redefined industry, right? So again, we're going to get into some of the benefits that we see with robotics in the larger broadband industry with some specific examples that showcase increased efficiency, reduced human error, enhanced safety, right? So let's go ahead and dive right in and get right into the meat of it. I'm pleased to welcome from Amphenol Communications Solutions, Abdullah Jassim. He is a field applications engineer for Amphenol Communications Solutions, and he's going to be giving us the lowdown on not only the larger trend here, but also how we're seeing it at play in Amphenol and what we can learn from that to apply to the larger industry. So, Abdullah, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Daniel. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Real pleasure getting to tap into your insights today and, again, learn a lot about this interesting mesh, right, of two modernizations that are shaping our larger national economy and really the global economy. You know, it's important to note that Industry 4.0 is a very real trend. It's being realized in most every kind of hard industry we can imagine right now, as well as every major industry where, we have legacy infrastructure that is in need of upgrades, whether we're talking about telecom or the energy grid, for example, or some of our other utilities. And so this is not a particularly new trend, but as I was doing my research on this topic and preparing some questions and talking points with you, I noticed there isn't a lot of reporting out there right now on this trend, on this merging of Industry 4.0, robotics and automation evolutions shaping the larger broadband and telecom industries. So I think we're actually opening up dialogue here that's very timely, very needed for the larger industry and something that we can, pride ourselves about getting in the weeds on. So I'm very pleased to have you here as the one that we get to dive into this with. So why don't we just start big picture here? When we talk about this blend of robotics applications, robotics automation, and even the AI layer into the maintenance, upkeep, the day-to-day operations and the future of the broadband industry, where is that intersection at right now? Give us your overview, especially as someone who's in the field working on engineering a lot of these applications yourself.
In my opinion, the biggest two factors for these robots are going to be used in inspection as well as installation for a lot of these broadband infrastructure applications. So those are the two main points where robotics is being used into inspection as well as installation.
And if you had to describe kind of at a high level what that trend looks like, I mean, like how far along is this blending of robotics automation with the broadband industry? Is it a standard yet? Yeah. Is it something that's still relatively new that we're seeing, municipalities and some of their partners, whether Amphenol or otherwise, experimenting with? I mean, basically, how far along are we in this adoption of robotics into the broadband industry?
That's a great question. There's certainly a lot of robotics out there right now being used for inspection and for installation. And there's a lot of new startups coming in and out of this industry that are specialized in this application because they know that there is a huge demand. There's going to be a huge demand for faster internet, for more connectivity. And so they understand that there's going to be a huge push for that infrastructure. And so when it comes to that infrastructure, you have things such as undersea cables that pass internet from one continent to the next. And you have I think it's like right now, over 800,000 miles of undersea cables. And it's really hard to inspect and maintain those cables purely based on having just technicians, for example. So that's why you'll see a lot of new robotics companies that are prototyping and building these inspection robots that can go onto the seabed and inspect the cables down there. That's one big push that I've seen so far.
Yeah, and I mean, I think that's a perfect example in that it showcases the level of complexity and intensity that maintaining our modern broadband infrastructure takes, right? When it comes to safety, we can never have too much of it. And so these applications that prioritize safety and prioritize operational efficiency, I think are really going to drive these applications forward. Would you agree? You think those are going to be some of the first applications where we really see, robotics become more of a standard in the industry? Or are there other applications where you see more of a standardization trend where adoption of robotics is becoming the new norm?
It's definitely a huge thing right now for inspection, just because, like I said, over 800,000 miles of cables, that's really hard to keep and maintain. And a lot of times these cables are on the seabed in shark-infested water. So that's not something that a technician would want to go deep sea diving into, So that's why these robots are very helpful. And not only are they great for safety, but they're also very precise and much quicker than having a deep sea diver going down there, because of course they need oxygen. They need to come up. They have fatigue, but these robots can. Right now, I saw they can go for hours without stopping and keep doing the inspection process. There's also robots right now for utility poles that have fiber optic internet. They go up there and inspect the cables as well as inspecting the utility pole itself, and they can detect whether the pole has damage or if it needs maintenance or anything of that sort.
Let's talk a little bit more about network maintenance. It seems clear this is going to be some of the primary driving use cases, or use case, I guess, more generally, that is going to drive forward the adoption of robotics. How are you seeing other companies utilize robotics, or even Amphenol, right? utilize or encourage the utilization of robotics for network maintenance in more unique ways? Anything that stands out to you? I mean, obviously, Shark Week deep sea diving for undersea cables is pretty unique and pretty exhilarating as an example. But anything else that's unique in the kind of consistency that it offers, right? Even if it's a little more mundane, if it's just as essential for the upkeep of the network, then it's that much more important. So any other use cases that come to mind?
Yeah, another great example is these massive data centers all over the country. And these data centers, it's crucial for them to be running 24/7. It's very crucial. And so we've seen robotics being used that are automated. They just follow the same path every day throughout the data center and taking thermal imaging and taking pictures and a lot of data in for technicians to look at later on and see if there's any problems. And so it's very easy to have these automated robots going around all the time instead of having technicians there 24/7.
We're seeing some other advancements in robotics today that, are getting a lot of, robotics engineers excited. I mean, these are things like soft robotics, right? More flexible, almost like, not organic necessarily, but like approximating that level of fluidity in robotic solutions, as well as autonomous drones, right? And I mean, the way that they play into the larger robotics ecosystem and are understood as a robotic solution. Where are you seeing some of those more maybe unique robotics applications, the actual robots themselves, getting deployed in broadband? I could see a lot of use cases for drones kind of assisting in some of this maintenance, but I'm curious what you're seeing in the field yourself and if anything else comes to mind.
Drones is another great example. A lot of utility companies that provide internet use drones to inspect their utility poles as well. And so it's a very cost-effective solution, and it's not very hard to maintain these drones. They're very simple.
A lot of your experience specifically lies in process optimization and process automation. Is that right?
Yeah, we've worked with a lot of companies that are specialized in process optimization, especially in manufacturing.
If you had to connect the dots a little bit with your experience, because I know you have pretty robust engineering experience even beyond just at Amphenol. How would you approach the use of robotics in things like network maintenance, in process optimization, whether that's for the manufacture of new infrastructure, whether that's for the efficiency of maintenance and upkeep and monitoring processes? Pull from some of your own experience and some of the projects you've worked on to help kind of connect those dots there for us and for our audience.
I actually worked on a project to design an autonomous drone to inspect wind turbine blades, because wind turbine blades are getting massive. They're getting huge, and a lot of times you'll find them in the seabed. So it's very hard for technicians to come in and inspect these wind turbine blades, because it's a lot of times when you're getting down further into the blade, it gets very narrow, so it's hard to maneuver around. And so my project that I worked on, we looked at many different types of sensors to use and which ones would work the best in this application, because you have to think about a lot of different factors. You have to think about environmental factors. You have to think about the flight time and safety concerns as well. And so it takes a while to work on the factors that you probably didn't think were a huge deal, but they are a huge deal in the end. So you have to really look at every single scenario that you can think of and make sure that your product or your design can handle each specific scenario, especially the ones that are the most important. That's where a lot of times is your energy and your focus is on. And so we looked at different sensors and we did a lot of testing, a lot of testing, testing than we probably should needed, but it's always helpful to make sure that you're doing things correctly.
I'm glad you brought up some of those real world applications. I mean, that's a big part of your work and has been in your engineering experience in your career so far is, a product testing and design for real world applications, helping develop solutions that are fine-tuned to meet the specific needs of that industry, that environment, that use case, that workflow and process. So drawing from that experience and that, professional lens, what specific challenges do you anticipate for implementing robotics across diverse telecom environments, right? Specifically, around design and implementation. We can talk about some of the market and industry forces later, but just in the actual integration and workflows of bringing these robotics into and interfacing with existing and new infrastructure, what are some of the challenges you anticipate? And are there any lessons that you've learned from your career that maybe we could offer as a bit of advice, right, for streamlining robotics adaptation in telecom infrastructure?
So in my experience, the biggest thing was we were pushing towards an automated drone that uses AI to inspect those wind turbine blades. And this sort of system can be used for a lot of different inspection processes. But the biggest challenge was that when you have sort of closed spaces or tight spaces and you're using automated drone systems, it's even with AI, it's not always perfect, and you always have potentially your crash avoidance system not working perfectly. So that's a big thing that you have to look at is what are some of the fail safes implemented so that this specific scenario does not happen, where the safety precautions are upheld.
But I am curious if you had to kind of just take your experience working in and around the larger broadband and telecom industry, especially now with, boots on the ground, you're in the weeds of seeing these use cases in action. Do you see any larger market or industry forces that may pose a bit of an adoption challenge for the integration of these robotics into telecom workflows? Whether that has to do with things like industry education, existing professionals knowing their way around these tools, how to use them properly in their workflows. It could be, more to do with just the integration of these two industries. Maybe robotics is focused elsewhere. I mean, what are your thoughts? Do you have any thoughts about maybe potential industry forces and some of the relationships and nuances of the industry itself that may pose a challenge, and any thoughts on overcoming those?
With anything new, there's always an issue with implementation. It's always a big push towards having everything work perfectly. And it, of course, like anything, it's going to take time. It's going to take a lot of time and training for these new processes. I think that would be the biggest issue with implementing these new, whether it be robotic inspection systems or robotic installation systems.
When we talk about robotic solutions, it's maybe taken for granted to some degree that there are no real robotic solutions without a layer of edge data capture, interpretation, and feeding back either to the cloud or a lot of these processes increasingly happening at the edge where the robotics themselves are intelligent, are able to make split decisions, are able to adapt in real time to their harsh or difficult environments, not just sort of be an extension, another tool that is directly managed by human input. So I'm curious your thoughts then on where you're seeing AI-powered robotics, or at least big data-powered robotics applications driving some great use cases in telecom and broadband operations. Everything from predictive maintenance to network optimization to more real-time maintenance that can maneuver difficult environments. How are you seeing that data layer play a role in real time or even otherwise to help refine processes post-project?
That's a great question. I definitely think that there's a huge push right now to have that sort of data layer implemented in these systems so that it becomes a lot more automated and it can predict a lot more predictive maintenance issues. And so a lot of times when you see these startups or new projects working on these new robotic systems, that's always a huge factor into these new systems. This is a big push for them to be integrated with this new technology that we have here right now.
Well, I think that more or less covers our episode today. Thank you for the pulse check. These are really exciting updates. And honestly, this is just kind of scratching the surface. I think a lot of these robotics applications are going to come into focus for us and give us more to talk about as we see them adopted en masse and we see more utilities players and public-private partnerships even, or even cross-industry partnerships and collaborations advance the robotics themselves and get more creative with their use cases. But I just wanted to pose up a last question, which is to look ahead a little bit. Whether this has to do with policy, whether this has to do with technological advancement, whether this has to do with the use cases themselves, kind of iterating upon and reinforcing how robotics should be implemented. What do you see on the horizon for the implementation of robotics at scale en masse for the larger telecom industry? And what are the major trends that you think are going to shape that horizon?
Right now, we're at a very early stage, I believe, in these robotic solutions. And of course, with early stage projects like these, it's going to be very expensive. But of course, through time, through the effects of manufacturing, these solutions will be cheaper and cheaper, and you'll see them more often in the real world.
More often and cheaper and better, right? That tends to be the trend, as these new technologies find their footing and their use cases become repeatable and replicable across the whole industry. Naturally, the cost of deployment, of development, of maintenance, of the robotics themselves will all come down as well. So we'll keep a pulse to those trends as well here in the near future. But till then, Abdullah, thank you so much for your input, your insights, and your analysis, as well as just giving us some peeks into your own experience working on these projects in the field. So we'll definitely be in touch for future updates on this. But till then, folks, we've been chatting with Abdullah Jassim. He's a field applications engineer with Amphenol Communications Solutions. And Abdullah, if folks want to learn a little bit more about some of the work you're doing, or maybe tap into some of the larger work that Amphenol is doing on facilitating or helping to implement robotics for the larger industry, how can they get in touch? How can they learn more about you or the company?
The best way to learn more about Amphenol is through our LinkedIn page or through our website. I see our LinkedIn page always pop, and there's always new articles out there and that showcase what we're doing out here. Another great way if anyone wants to connect with me, you can connect through my LinkedIn. It's just Abdullah Jassim. I'm sure you'll find me. And yeah, that's it for me.
All right, Abdullah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. And good luck out there in the field. Maybe we'll see some Abdullah Shark Week here soon if you do decide to go deep sea diving on those cables. But
I hope not.
Yeah, hopefully not. Hopefully not. That might be a bit too precarious, a bit too adventurous. But yeah, man, thank you so much. Real pleasure getting to chat, and we'll see you on the next episode.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Daniel.
And thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's episode of Wavelengths, an Amphenol Broadband Solutions podcast. If you like what you heard and saw today and you want to tap into previous conversations with the Amphenol team or with other key figures, thought leaders, and professionals in the larger broadband and telecom industry, you can head to our website, amphenolbroadband.com, to tap into those episodes, or you can subscribe to Wavelengths on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, right? Hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss notifications on new episodes, and you've got that full catalog to dive back into. And you can see some of my evolution, too. I've been at this now for a few years with the team. It's always fun to look back at the episodes from 3 years ago and say, oh, boy, that guy looked like a little baby. But, hey, time matures us all, and it keeps the podcast interesting, too. We've got a lot of great topics lined up with other thought leaders in the industry, so you don't want to miss out on them. And if you're curious about our solutions and services as a company, how we can partner up or work together in the larger industry, you can head to our website, again, amphenolbroadband.com. I'm your host, Daniel Litwin, the voice of B2B, and we'll catch you on the next episode of Wavelengths.